Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a stack of sources to really unpack a specific kind of tool software made for writers. It's got a strong focus on screenwriting, but honestly, it seems to be aiming for much more than just that.
That's right.
We've got a few articles, some excerpts here that lay out what this app called TwelvePoint is all about. They get into its core ideas, its features, and who they think it's really for. And these aren't just like marketing fluff. The sources actually go into some detail about the why behind the design.
Yeah, they do.
So our mission today, cut through the details, figure out what these sources say makes TwelvePoint different. How does it try to, simplify the writing process? Which, let's face it, can be pretty complex, especially with all the formatting rules for things like screenplays.
Definitely.
And what possibilities does it maybe open up for storytellers? That's what the materials suggests anyway. Whether you're writing a film script, a novel, maybe even a comic. We're sticking just to what these sources tell us, looking for those key insights.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting mix of sources. They seem to connect the dots between, software design, which can be pretty technical, and the creative process, which is often, messy and human.
Right.
We're looking at a tool here that, based on these descriptions anyway, seems built with a really specific understanding of the writer's challenges, especially when you're wrestling with structure, formatting, keeping track of everything in your story world.
Yeah.
And there's this recurring theme about taking away the technical friction, so you can just focus on the creative flow.
Okay, let's get into it then. So, right off the bat, the sources introduced TwelvePoint as a professional screenwriting app, specifically for macOS and iOS. But they make this really clear distinction almost immediately. They say it's emphatically not a word processor. What's the big deal there? Why is that so important to them?
Well, that's a really critical starting point, It's kind of fundamental to how they describe TwelvePoint. They explain that your standard word processors, the things most of us use for writing, like letters or reports, they typically throw in a huge range of features, almost overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, like everything in the kitchen sink.
Exactly. Think about all the detailed control you get. Page layout down to the tiniest margin adjustment, line spacing, tons of font choices, all the formatting like bold, italics, colors, highlights.
Tables, charts.
Right, inserting complex stuff like tables or graphs. The sources are pretty blunt about it, they say. These features go far beyond the screenwriting need. They actually call them enrichments.
Enrichments, huh? That sounds a bit dismissive.
It does a bit, yeah. But the point is, TwelvePoint intentionally leaves these out.
So it's all about focus, just stripping away anything that isn't strictly about the writing content.
Precisely. That's the main description they use, content-focused. The big goal, according to this material, is just to get rid of distractions. Let the writer concentrate purely on the story, the characters, the dialogue, the action, without getting bogged down in how it looks on the page yet.
Okay, how do they do that?
To help with that, they structure everything using these things called panels inside each project. So instead of juggling a bunch of separate windows floating around.
Yeah, which gets messy fast.
Right. Everything for your project, the script itself, your notes, character details, goals, whatever, it's all organized in these integrated panels. And you, the writer, decide which panels you want to see for what you're doing right then. The app remembers your setup.
Ah, customizable workspace.
Exactly. And the whole interface design philosophy is described as reduced to the minimum. They call it minimalist several times. It's specifically designed to cut down on visual clutter, distractions.
Okay.
And that ties right into one of their fundamental design ideas, providing a relaxing environment, an inviting space where you can just focus on the story.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Less clutter, less stuff demanding your attention means more brain power for the actual writing, right? You're not fiddling with margins.
Exactly. It reduces that cognitive load. Your brain's on the narrative, the characters, the plot. And this focus is really enabled by the other huge thing they stress, automation.
Ah, yes, automation.
Yeah.
That seems pretty central to this whole not a word processor thing. How does TwelvePoint use automation? Based on what we're reading here. How does that help the writer?
It's presented as absolutely key, yeah. A core part of its value. The sources explain that TwelvePoint automatically formats the stuff you write based on the publishing type you choose for your project.
So like movie script, TV show.
Right. Movie, screenplay, teleplay, stage play, novel, even comics. You tell it what you're making, and the app takes your raw text and automatically handles the page layout, the text formatting, the spacing, all according to industry standards.
Industry standards. Like specific ones.
Yeah, they mention examples like American, Italian, French, Korean standards. But they also say you can set up custom ones. So the writer just needs to type the content.
Hmm.
Scene headings, action, character names, dialogue, transitions.
Right.
And the app does all the heavy lifting. It manages the page layout, text formatting, correct spacing, parsing, and much more. That parsing bit is interesting. It means the app understands what each line is. Is it dialogue? Is it action? Based on context, or maybe just a little hint from you.
Okay, so it figures it out.
Yeah. And they really contrast this with word processors, where you have to do all that manually. Applying styles, fixing line breaks, getting dialogue indented just right, watching page counts, all stuff they basically frame as distractions.
So hang on. If I understand this right, I could just type out my story elements, almost like I'm writing notes, or like they said, type it like in a chat, maybe on my phone.
Right.
And then, boom, 12Point takes that relatively simple input and turns it into a perfectly formatted industry standard script with page breaks, scene numbers, capitalized character names, all that fiddly stuff.
That is exactly the goal the sources keep repeating. They explicitly position it as making screenwriting and other kinds of formatted writing accessible to everyone, regardless of writing experience.
Wow.
The whole technical side of getting it ready for publishing, they say, becomes as easy as saving a note.
That sounds like a huge barrier removed, especially for beginners. I mean, screenplay format can be super intimidating.
Totally. For beginners, they claim it's this perfect combination of simplicity, automation that gets them up to speed in no time. It removes that big technical hurdle.
But it's not just for beginners.
No, they're quick to add it's for pros, too, offering that same streamlined, minimalist interface, but combined with powerful features to speed up the writing and review process. So it's meant to scale with you. Automation is the engine, freeing up your focus, whether you're new or experienced.
The idea being formatting shouldn't be a creative roadblock.
Exactly. It should just happen automatically as a result of you telling the story.
Okay, so beyond that minimalist look and the focus on automation, what else is really core to 12Point's design philosophy based on these sources? They listed a few fundamental things they considered.
Right. So building on that focused working environment, another key thing they point out is customizable details. The idea here is, okay, it's minimal and automated, but you should still control what information you see while you're creating.
So you're not overloaded.
Yeah. The app, they suggest, shouldn't bother you with features or settings you don't need right then. It's about tailoring what's visible to your immediate task. Avoid the overwhelm.
Makes sense. What else?
Another really fundamental one is about respecting the writer's individual creative process. They call this creative process options.
Okay.
And the sources are emphatic here. 12Point shall not force the writer in adapting Hischer's creative flow. Basically, the tool needs to be flexible. You decide where to start, maybe a synopsis, maybe jumping right into scene one. You decide how you build the story.
It adapts to you, not the other way around.
That's the goal. And they highlight this by talking about how it supports different kinds of writers, using those common terms, plotter and pantser.
Plotter versus pantser. Classic.
Yeah.
How did the sources define those in this context, and how does the app supposedly cater to each?
Well, they describe a plotter as someone who, maps everything out first. They know the beginning, the major beats, the ending. They build the story block by block, structure first, details later.
The architect.
Kind of, yeah. And for them, the sources say 12Point offers specific views focused on story structure, the sequence of events, maybe visual tools, outlines, ways to map out that path.
Okay. And the pantser.
The pantser, flying by the seat of their pants, they might start with just an idea, a character, but they like to discover the story as they write it. They're surprised by where it goes.
The explorer.
Right. For pantsers, the sources highlight things like the full screen mode. Just pure writing, no distractions, total focus environment, and also the ability to jump straight into the editor, quickly creating actions, dialogue, without needing to fuss with structure first.
So easy entry.
Yeah, a frictionless path from idea to scene. The main claim is the app is flexible enough for either style, or even if you're a mix of both. It gives you tools relevant to how you work, doesn't force one method.
That seems pretty important. Recognizing that creativity isn't one size fits all.
Definitely. The insight seems to be that the software should empower your natural way of working, not dictate it.
And that also suggests the tool has to manage more than just lines of text, right? If it's supporting outlines and free writing. What about managing all the content you create? It sounds like a 12-point project is more than just a script file.
Oh, absolutely. That leads to another really fundamental point they make. They describe TwelvePoint not just as an editor, but as a content management and story designer integrated with a publishing engine.
Okay, break that down. Content management and story designer.
Right, so a project file, it has a 0.11 peat extension, isn't just text. It's described as containing paragraphs, images, tags, reading notes, and much more, all within that one file.
Like a container for everything.
Exactly. The key idea is that all this different stuff, the script text, your notes, character bios, research images, the tags you assign, it's all kept organized and accessible at your fingertips. It's not like having your script in one doc, notes in another, character list somewhere else.
Which is how a lot of people work now.
Right. This suggests a much more structured, almost database-like approach, managing the whole ecosystem of your story information together. The idea being that modern stories involve way more than just the final text, and the tool should handle all of it.
Okay, so it's this structured container for your whole story world, basically. Let's get into the specific features then. What makes it powerful, according to these sources, beyond the auto-formatting and this integrated structure? Where does the designer part really shine?
Well, one feature they really highlight, call it one of the most powerful, is something they term multidimensional writing.
Multidimensional writing. Sounds fancy.
It does, yeah. But the idea is, because all the content, script, notes, tags, characters is organized in this internal database, that structure allows for what they call multidimensional analysis.
Okay, analysis of a screenplay. How does that work for a writer? What does it mean practically?
It means you can, as the sources say, inspect the scenario from different points of view, filter it, and manipulate it in ways that go way beyond just reading it start to finish.
Like how? Give me an example.
Okay, so yeah, you can read scene by scene like a normal script, but because it's all database elements, you can filter the whole story by tags you've assigned. Let's say you tagged every scene related to a specific subplot.
Right.
You could then choose to view only those scenes, pull that storyline out completely, and review it on its own. Or find every single paragraph where a specific character speaks, or even just appears in an action line.
Ah, okay, so you can isolate threads.
Exactly. Slice and dice the story data, look at it from different angles, and they claim this 360-degree view helps cut down on common problems.
Like what?
Like plot holes. If you can see just one plot line laid out, it's easier to spot inconsistencies, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Helps reduce mistakes and typos by letting you review targeted sections, like checking all of one character's dialogue for consistency. And it cuts down on repetitive tasks, like manually searching hundreds of pages for every time a certain prop is mentioned, or every scene in a specific location.
So you're treating the story almost like data you can query.
Basically, yeah. It turns editing from just a linear read-through into something more like dynamic analysis. That seems to be the core idea behind multidimensional.
That sounds incredibly useful.
Hmm.
Almost essential for really complex stories, multiple characters, twisty plots. It's analytical as much as creative.
It seems geared towards that refinement stage, definitely.
Okay, so you can dive deep. What about just getting ideas down quickly, when you're not at your desk?
Oh.
Inspiration rarely waits.
Right. The sources really emphasize mobility as a core principle and a big benefit. It's about the freedom to write wherever.
It's on iPhone, iPad.
Exactly. Mac, iPad, iPhone, even Vision Pro, they encourage you to capture ideas as soon as it gets to you. They paint these little pictures, adding dialogue, waiting for the bus, jotting a character note on the train, maybe sketching a plot point in a bar.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Because the app is consistent across these devices, you can add stuff anywhere on whatever you have handy. And a project started on your phone, they say, can be easily imported or archived on any other Apple device. Your work travels with you.
Seamlessly.
That's the claim. And they even mention, like you picked up on, typing like in a chat on mobile, suggesting a really fluid, easy way to get thoughts down without friction.
Typing a like in a chat for a screenplay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really nails the not a word processor vibe. Super informal capture, formal output later. That flexibility sounds great. But what if I have stuff I already wrote? Like in a text file or maybe Word? Am I stuck starting over in 12-point?
No, they address that. They talk about free text writing, which means you're not totally locked into their structured editor from square one. You've got options.
Like importing.
Yeah, you can import existing texts in common formats, TXT, RTF, HTML, docs, that's Word, or Fountain, which is a popular plain text markup for scripts.
Okay.
Or you can just type directly in 12-point. using a plain text style that kind of looks like a traditional script layout. And the app's intelligence kicks in again. It will interpret the lines and integrate the new content in the project seamless.
So that parsing engine works on imported stuff too.
Seems like it. It figures out the scene headings, characters, dialogue, and pulls it into its structured database. They also give an example for collaboration. You can export as RTF, send it to someone using Word maybe, get their edits, and then import that revised version back into TwelvePoint.
Okay, so it plays reasonably well with others. Not a totally closed system. That's pretty important for pros.
It definitely seems designed to fit into existing workflows to some extent.
So beyond the writing and formatting, what other tools for like organizing or developing the story are mentioned? It sounds like there's a whole suite in there.
Yeah, the sources detail quite a few tools for planning, organizing, developing the structure, and the world.
Like what?
First, there's something called goals. It's described as a sort of dashboard space in your project. You set up checklist goals, finish Act 1, write 5 scenes today, complete a character profile, whatever. It gives you a 360 degrees view on the status, helps you track progress.
Okay, project management lead.
Kind of. Then storyboards. This lets you create a high-level view of the story. You can use images for scenes or plot points or just quick text summaries, add images, tags, notes to these storyboard blocks, arrange them visually.
Like digital index cards, but integrated.
Yeah, they explicitly contrast it with disorganized notes or physical stickers, suggesting it's more structured and right there in the app.
Gotcha. What else?
World building, especially for, sci-fi, fantasy, historical stuff. They offer a world building Bible template. Lets you create entries for locations, factions, history, magic systems, whatever, and link text descriptions, notes, maybe images to them.
So you build your reference library inside the project.
Right, and that Bible can be exported in various formats, PDF, HTML, etc., for easy reference outside the app, too.
Handy. Anything for characters specifically?
Yep, a character arc feature designed to streamline character development. You can track attributes, write detailed descriptions, manage aliases or different names they use, and it even has multi-language support just for character details, which could be useful for international stories.
Okay.
Then there's story segmentation, tagging. This sounds really powerful. Described as more powerful than index cards, you can assign custom tags to basically any element, scenes, paragraphs, characters, locations, plot points.
Why? What does that let you do?
Well, it lets you layer in details, link things to specific plots or subplots across the whole script, and then this is key, use those tags to navigate or filter the story, which feeds right back into that multidimensional analysis we talked about. Tagging is how you slice the data.
Right. It enables the filtering.
Exactly. And related to organizing visuals, they mention resources management. Lets you associate images or drawings with specific parts of your script. Could be inspiration, character sketches, location photos, useful for reference, or maybe even for publishing, like in comics.
And navigating all this.
There's the script navigator. It's a tree view, like an outline. Lets you discover the script from all perspectives. They compare it to managing files and folders in Finder or Explorer. A clear hierarchy to see your story's structure and jump around easily.
Wow. That's a pretty comprehensive set of tools. Really supporting the whole process, not just typing words, planning, organizing, structuring.
Yeah, it definitely seems to acknowledge that writing a story is much more than just a linear sequence of paragraphs.
Yeah. Okay, what about sharing the work? Collaboration, that's huge, especially professionally.
Sharing and data protection, listed as absolutely fundamental in their design philosophy. The sources say content needs to be shared easily, but crucially, independently of third-party software.
Meaning,
and they really stress this, no storing on third-party servers. It's a strong stance on privacy and control. Your project data lives locally on your device.
not in the cloud somewhere.
Not unless you choose to put it there via, say, iCloud folders. The app itself doesn't rely on external servers for storage. To share securely, it uses encryption. You can email an encrypted project file or archive it. They specifically mention you do not need to pay additional costs for remote storage because of this local approach.
Interesting.
You can also share directly using things like iCloud Drive folders or AirDrop between Apple devices, still keeping it within your control.
And privacy.
They made a big point that you don't need to register or give personal details to use all the features, and that the app does not track or share information over the internet. That focus on local control, privacy, no tracking, it seems like a really significant part of their pitch.
Yeah, that definitely stands out today. Puts the user in charge of their own work. Okay, so first draft is done, maybe. What about refining it revision, analysis. The sources mentioned tools for that too,
Oh,
right?
yeah. There's a whole section in the sources on review, convert, and analyze, features for polishing and preparing the work.
Like what?
First, revision mode. This is mainly for movie or TV scripts where tracking change is critical. You can switch a script to a production version, turn on revision mode, and then every change, adds, deletes, tweaks, gets marked automatically using the standard Hollywood color code.
Blue pages, pink.
Exactly. Blue, pink, yellow, green, etc. for each revision round. Super important for production. And these revised scripts can be shared securely with the tracking intact.
Okay, crucial for industry work. What else?
Optimization. This ties back to that core idea. Content is separated from the formatting. Because it's all structured data, not fixed text on a page, they claim you can easily make big structural changes after writing.
Like rearranging scenes.
Yeah, change scene order, delete scenes, add paragraphs, rename a character everywhere in the script with one command, change tags, and the key thing is no matter what you change, the final layout is always perfect no matter what, just with one click.
So you don't have to manually fix pagination and formatting after every rewrite.
Exactly. The app handles all the recalculations instantly. Huge time saver during rewrites, they suggest.
I can see that. What about convert?
The convert feature sounds pretty powerful. You can take any script or manuscript in 12Point and duplicate it as another type without messing up the original.
A screenplay to stage play.
Yeah, that's an example they give. Convert a screenplay into a stage play in no time, automatically adjusting the formatting. You could maybe convert a script structure into a novel outline, or the other way around. It leverages the underlying content.
And importing, exporting.
Oh yeah, robust support there. Export as PDF, RTF, plain text, HTML, EPUB for novels, and crucially, FDX, which is the final draft format.
Compatibility with a big player.
Exactly. And it can import FDX too, plus doc, plain text, RTF. So good compatibility coming and going.
Okay. Any analysis tools?
They mention reports, generating statistical reports using predefined indicators. They don't list them all, but you can imagine things like character dialogue counts, scene lengths, page counts per act, objective data about your script.
Interesting. Numbers about your story.
And building on tagging again, tagging and tracking can associate numeric values, not just for plot points, but maybe tracking expenses for props tagged in scenes or estimated shooting durations. Then you could generate stats on that.
Wow, okay, that's bordering on production planning.
Yeah, it suggests possibilities beyond just the creative writing part.
That's really powerful, the stats, the conversion between formats.
Yeah.
Seems like it could save enormous effort later on.
You mentioned multi-language earlier, too. The sources elaborated on that. It's not just the interface, right?
Absolutely. Multi-language support is a big feature. It handles all the writing systems supported on your device. So English, Russian, Arabic, Hebrew, Chinese, Korean, Tamil, tons of languages and scripts.
Including right to left.
Yep, includes right-to-left support for languages like Arabic and Hebrew. And the UI itself comes in multiple languages too. English, Chinese, French, German, Italian, Korean, Russian, Spanish, Turkish are mentioned.
But it goes deeper than just typing in Spanish.
Yes. For publishing, it supports various global standards, American, French, Italian, Korean, plus custom rules. The multi-language features help customize the style elements when adapting a script. Things like scene headings, transitions, coupe instead of cut to,
Yeah.
location formats, character name conventions. They differ by language and region.
So it helps format correctly for France versus the US. Right. The app doesn't translate your story content. It's not Google Translate. But it gives you tools to configure these stylistic elements to match a specific language's publishing standards. This helps avoid formatting mistakes, wrong pagination, and other usually difficult to catch errors when you adapt a script manually for a different market.
So it understands international formatting nuances. That's pretty specialized.
It seems to be, recognizing that storytelling is global now, and the tools need to support that.
Okay, so we've got this app, unique approach, deep feature set, runs across Apple devices. What about the company behind it? Is there like a community? How do they operate, according to the sources?
Yeah, they touch on that. They present the development as very user-focused. The app is constantly updated based on feedback from our community.
They actually listen to users.
That's the claim. User suggestions are considered, and if they're feasible, new functionalities will be implemented directly in the app to benefit every user. They call it progressive updating.
So it evolves based on real needs.
Right. Integrating user requests or best practices while trying not to clutter the interface, sticking to that minimalist idea and keeping up with the latest OS updates.
Sounds collaborative.
It does. They mention a growing writing community associated with 12Point, providing access to shared resources like styles, maybe custom formats. Users share screenwriting tips, story building examples, suggests a place for users to connect and share.
And if you get stuck,
Paid help.
several resources mentioned. Blogs like insights and inspiration for articles, a big FAQ section, video tutorials, they specifically mentioned their YouTube channel, and direct email contact with customer care. So multiple ways to get support.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up.
Yep.
Based on these sources, 12Point seems fundamentally different from a word processor. It's minimalist, content-focused, heavily automated to remove technical hurdles.
Right.
It uses this integrated content management system, treating the story like structured data, which enables powerful stuff like that multi-dimensional writing for analysis.
The filtering and slicing. Plus a whole suite of tools for organizing, planning goals, storyboards, world building, strong privacy focus with local data, lots of multi-language and international format support. And it's all across the Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, the sources really paint this picture of a tool designed specifically to get technical stuff out of the writer's way. Let them focus just on the story, from that first idea on their phone right through to publishing in different standard formats.
Screenplays, stage plays, novels.
Right. And that adaptability for different writing styles, blotter versus pantser, plus the strong features for revision and analysis, those really stand out from the material. It feels like a tool built for the creative process. Not just adapted to it.
Yeah, it definitely highlights what happens when software gets really specific about a task instead of trying to do everything. By ditching the general purpose enrichments, they seem to have enabled deeper automation and analysis.
That seems to be the trade-off they embraced.